Well, welcome again to the seventh part of our lecture on the depressions and the crisis. Well, we were talking on the SSA of the United States in 1940s and 50s. And, 1940s and 50s first saw the expansion of the capitalist system, basically, which basically complemented the Capital Labor Accord and Capital Citizens Accord, which was decreasing the costs basically for the capitalists in the United States. And basically that expansion was dominated with the US companies, which actually becomes partners in the rest of the world, and the demand for United States goods becomes larger, and basically they also become to produce in the foreign companies and begin to make use of the inputs from the foreign nations, which basically also means that actually they might benefit from the surplus value of the workers who are producing those inputs, especially if those prices are lower than their actual exchange values. And the elimination of global competitors after the World War II, not only Germany and Japan, but also the England and France, which were devastated at the war, was very important steps. And as US colonies were basically become independent, the UK's influence in those colonies becomes smaller, and United States influence gets larger also. So United States benefit from this geographic expansion a lot. But about the USSR at that time, which was basically took around 1/3 of the world, including China in time. Well, basically, even the smallest expansions of the USSR was seen as a major thing at the time. So United States actually had the majority of the world was in control of the United States, and it still had some influence even in the USSR controlled part. Vice versa was also to some extent true, but basically, we might say when we look to the overall picture, United States had the greater control over the world system, including USSR's role itself. USSR was more passive, the defender in that picture, and USSR at the communist world was also contained. So some area was given to them, but they did not go much beyond that area, mostly, especially after China was basically become communist. There were some minor expansions, but basically mostly the USSR was contained. And USSR and United States also had ideologically counterbalance each other. So basically, each basically make other group see evil, so that any group that was against the system, criticized the system, was accused of being communist. So that also creates some kind of political, a political tool to the system to stabilize basically what was happening in the system. 1960s and 70s, this SSI begins to come to its limits. Why? Well, even in contained form, the two powerful unions starts to increase the labor costs. Especially also the unemployment rate was low. Inevitably, according to Marxian analysis, this would increase to make the labor problematic. And the demand subsidies also starts to create taxes, which also creates additional problem. And basically, the main problem, however, and which actually makes this labor cost and the subsidy cost even more important, even more even more hurting, was the thing that there were new competitors, not USSR. I'm not mentioning USSR here. I'm mentioning countries like Germany, Japan, France as major economic powers who start to spread. Their companies become active. They become to invest other countries and get the share of the United States, basically. And on the other hand, the developing countries like Turkey, Latin America, East Asia, they become increasing industrialized, and they want basically their own products to be sold in their countries instead of the US products or European products. So US ability to exploit the foreign labor, US ability to create demand in the foreign markets gets smaller. So this puts a stain in the labor, in the profit rate of the United States, basically. Of course, in addition to that, we might have the traditional Z over K process that is also lowering the profit rate. The rise in organic composition of capital. And all of these things actually limit the expansion of the companies. Previously, the companies could expand easily, so their competition was not that intense. Now the competition becomes more intense, so companies start to eat, basically, try to eat each other's basically shares in the market. So the competition cost also starts to rise. So how the system solved this problem? It has solved this problem by creating a new SSA. So in this new SSA, initially the increased in the non-traditional members in the labor force destabilized the capital labor, stabilized the capital labor accord and decreased the cost for the companies. Women, students, and increasingly immigrant workers, and even more increasingly than immigrant workforce, is illegal, undocumented. When it is undocumented, it means it doesn't have that much right. It gives a lot of power to the corporations, so the capital, more power to the capital, since their workers now lack of citizenship rights, basically. So as a result, should the union workers bother with that? This new workers who are not even citizens, they should, because that puts pressure on them. And their power gets also smaller. So the union workers themselves need to compromise. They also, and the unions themselves start to dissolve. So all of these things had been beneficial for the capital, which is at the center of the system. Labor costs for them start to decrease, while workers might be facing with a stagnant or even decreasing wage at large, but that has kind of stabilized the system for the capital. How is demand created? This demand is created by borrowing. State starts to create demand by borrowing money from the market, increasing after 1980s, not before after 1970s and 80s, basically. And the people, the consumers, also starts to borrow more money from the financial market and basically create consumption demands. So the credit card debt starts to rise up. The students basically starts to get money for their colleges. People start to get money for the healthcare. People start to get money to get house, and all in the house think the house there is their own, but they need to spend 20 years before the house is actually theirs. In addition to that, capital become more mobile. So and basically the countries outside of the United States become highly indebted because they also were affected by the global crisis at the time, and increasingly those the companies which were partnerships were again to be taken over by the United States, and basically, while previously those industrialized companies were rejecting the US goods that are produced in the United States, increasingly those products become the United States companies begin to take over their own the industries in those countries and begin to produce their products in those countries. Previously, that trend was relatively slow trend. Now this becomes a more common trend. The foreign companies start to produce in the developing world. And USSR has collapsed. This has opened the whole new area, including China, to the US corporations. So all of these things have restored the profit rates, decreased the costs for the companies, and basically this also decreased the intercapitalist competition and restored the system. Well, is it convincing? Well, it's convincing. But the main point is maybe we should look to the whole system in the global sense, and we should also think about restorations that are benefiting all actors, or restorations that only benefit the most critical actor, which is capital in the system. So clearly, the restoration we are talking about in 18th and 19th has benefited USA, the capital in the United States, a lot, but it didn't benefit the foreign countries and the workers, and maybe also create a sustainable spending scheme. It didn't also create a sustainable spending scheme, since that spending is basically financed by the borrowing. So to see the broader picture, we need to look to the world system theory, which we will do in, well, not this video, next video, but the third video after this one. So this is the end of this lecture. Well, actually this week's discussion is on the zero growth economy, where we will discuss, well, this is basically an idea of the environmentalist economists who basically think that basically we should be promoting an economic system where the growth rate is zero, so that the and basically we might be focusing on the improving the products we are doing, and basically increasing productivity, so people will have more time to spend freely. So the point is, however, as we have seen, according to Marxian school, and probably other economists in other schools will also agree with the basic statement, capitalist system is internally, in addition to all benefits created by the increase in the production level, capitalist system is internally a high growth rate. But environmental economists says maybe it is not. Well, people certainly don't think that they claim. People at this point, it's especially in the developed countries, not maybe in developing countries where people are still facing the poverty, but especially in the developed countries, with some redistribution to eliminate poverty, which exists also there, by the way. In America, you also have poverty in the United States. You might basically very well have a better situation when you have, instead of expanding further the output level, increase the free time. Well, but can capitalism survive that? Beyond people's living need in people's living standards to increase, does capitalist system needs internally this growth rate? Well, we have an interesting example, which is Japan. Japan has, for the 30 years almost, near zero growth rate. Well, did it collapse? No. Why did it not collapse? Because, well, one thing is, maybe it doesn't need growth rate, but also we had an excessive state spending there. State debt has increased to a very high levels, even higher than, well, in all whole world it has increased, but in Japan it is increased at even higher levels compared with other countries. And there are other strains in the country, like unemployment, which is creating strains in the country. So Japan case is interesting, which is a mixed example, and it's questionable also whether it could continue to stand its ground. So this is the discussion basically. The case of zero growth economy, is it desirable? And is it achievable? So this is this week's discussion. So I'm looking forward for your comments, and see you in the next lecture. And as always, stay healthy.